We spend a lot of our lives building things. Careers, homes, reputations, relationships. And at a certain point, quietly, the question changes. It shifts from, what am I building, to, what will remain? Not always loudly, but it shifts. Gene Kelly was one of the most gifted performers of the 20th century. As a dancer, a choreographer, and a director, he had a particular genius for combining technical precision with genuine feeling, a combination that is harder than it looks and rarer than it should be. Singin' in the Rain, An American in Paris, On the Town, the work he made still exists, still moves people, still inspires young dancers and filmmakers who weren't alive when he made it. That's a kind of legacy most people will never have, a body of work that endures across generations, that is almost certainly going to outlast everyone who is alive today. And yet, in his later years, in the conversations he had as an older man reflecting on what had mattered, Gene Kelly didn't talk mostly about the films or about the dancing. He talked about the people, about the younger performers he had worked with who had gone on to have their own careers, about the things he had tried to pass on, not just technique, but a particular way of approaching the work, a set of values about what it meant to do something well, something that couldn't be captured on screen, but that traveled from person to person in the particular way that wisdom actually moves. He talked about his children, and about the particular things he had tried to give them, not material things or career advantages, but intangible things. An approach to difficulty that came from watching him work through it. A sense of what it looked like to take something seriously without losing the joy of it. The understanding that craft and love were not opposites, that the most disciplined work could also be the most expressive. Those things, he said, mattered more to him than anything preserved on film. Because film is watched, but values are lived. And the values someone passes from themselves into another person are carried forward in a way that no camera can record and no archive can preserve. They simply become part of how that person moves through the world, invisible to anyone who doesn't know their origin, but real and lasting. Gene Kelly was, by most accounts, a disciplined and demanding person to work with. He had very high standards, and he expected others to rise to them. But those who worked with him closely also described him as someone who genuinely loved what he was doing, who found genuine joy in the solving of a difficult problem, in the working out of a sequence that wasn't quite right, in the moment when something finally came together in the way he had been imagining. That combination, high standards and genuine joy, is itself a kind of teaching. And it is the kind of teaching that travels through presence, not through instruction. Maybe you've received that kind of teaching. Maybe there is someone in your past, a parent, a teacher, a mentor, who demonstrated something important, not by explaining it, but by living it in front of you. Who showed you, by example, what it looked like to care deeply about something and work at it seriously. Who gave you a template for what a well-lived life could look like, simply by living one in your presence. And maybe, without quite realizing it, you've been passing some of that forward yourself. Most of us are building a legacy, whether we think of it that way or not. Not in the formal, declared sense, not through a documentary or an archive or a named scholarship, but in the more ordinary, more real sense, in how we treat people when we're tired, in what we do when things get hard and no one is watching, in the particular way we talk about failure, whether we hide it or acknowledge it or treat it as information, in whether we bring genuine attention to the things we care about or perform attention while something else occupies us underneath. The children and grandchildren and younger people in your life are watching. Not to evaluate you, they're not doing it consciously, but they're taking in what they see, building templates, absorbing the answer to questions they haven't quite formulated yet. What does it look like to get older well? What does it look like to handle difficulty with grace? What does it look like to love something or someone fully without pretense? Gene Kelly wanted to leave behind the understanding that work done with full commitment and genuine joy were not opposing things, that the most rigorous preparation could coexist with the most genuine expression. He wanted his students and his children to carry that forward, not because he told them to, but because they had seen it, and it had become part of how they understood what was possible. That's legacy in its truest form. Not what the world records, what people carry. What are you passing forward? Not as a judgment, as an invitation. Just to consider gently what the people around you are absorbing from watching you live. What templates they are building from what they observe, and whether there is anything you might want to offer more consciously. Any quality or value or approach to living that you wish someone had shown you, and that you have in some measure developed and could now more deliberately demonstrate. This doesn't require grand gestures. It doesn't require speeches or formal teachings. It just requires showing up consistently as the person you most want to be, and trusting that being that person in front of the people who are watching is itself a form of giving, a form of legacy, one that doesn't require a camera or an archive, just a life lived with some honesty and some care. Gene Kelly's dancing lives on film and will for as long as films are watched. But what he said he most wanted to leave behind, the approach to work, the love of the craft, the understanding that discipline and joy were the same thing when both were genuine, that lives in people. In the performers he trained, in the children he raised, in everyone who ever watched him work and thought, that's what it looks like to truly care about something. So take a slow breath. And maybe this week, think for a moment about what you're passing forward. Not through what you say, through how you live. That's the legacy that endures, and it's being built right now. There's something else worth sitting with here, something about the legacy we receive, not just the one we leave. Because most of us are walking around with a legacy inside us already, values and approaches and ways of seeing the world that were passed to us by people who came before. Some of it we received consciously in lessons explicitly taught. But most of it we received simply by watching, by being in the presence of people who lived in a particular way and absorbing, without intending to, something of how they did it. There is a woman or man in your family history who did something remarkable, probably in very ordinary circumstances, who got through a genuinely difficult thing with some measure of grace, who held a family together during a hard season, who worked for decades at something unglamorous with consistent dignity, who kept showing up for people who needed them without much acknowledgement and without quitting. That person's legacy lives in you, in ways you don't always recognize, in your capacity for patience you didn't know you had until you needed it, in your ability to be steady when things get hard, in the particular way you approach work or family or difficulty, a way that echoes, faintly but really, someone who did the same thing before you, in a different life and different circumstances, and passed something of it forward into yours. Gene Kelly was shaped by people who came before him, by Pittsburgh, by his family's expectations, by teachers whose names history has mostly forgotten, who nonetheless gave him something that became part of how he worked and what he made. The films are his, but they are built on something he received, and so is everything any of us makes, personal or professional, or simply the shape of who we've become. Maybe this is a good week to honor the legacy you've received, not in a formal or public way, but quietly, to yourself. To think about one person who passed something real into you. Someone whose influence you carry, even if they've been gone for years. And to notice with some gratitude that you are part of a chain that started long before you, and that, through you, will continue long after. That what you're passing forward is not entirely original to you. It is, in part, a continuation of something that has always been moving in the direction of what is good and worth keeping. Gene Kelly's legacy is on film and in people. Yours is in people, the ones around you now and the ones who will come after. Both kinds are real. Both kinds matter. And both are, in some quiet way, already underway. So take a slow breath. And maybe this week, let yourself be aware of both what you've received and what you're giving. That awareness alone is a kind of honoring of the people who made you and of the people who are even now being made by you.